Hey, what's up kiddos? Trowbro back with another drawing with Trowbro, and today we're going to be looking at how to draw a zombie from the video game Plants vs. Zombie. Now I'm trying to keep up with my Halloween themed month of October, and today we're drawing the spooky zombies from Plants vs. Zombies. So get your pencils ready and let's go ahead and get started.
So here on my left, I have my picture of the zombie from Plants vs. Zombie, and then I went ahead and I traced over the simple shapes that make up his body. Now, I'm going to get rid of my picture of the zombie, so now you can just see the shapes that make up his body, and as you can tell, you are not going to see any clothes on this guy. This is just his body frame, like what his arms and legs look like underneath his clothes. So right here, if you wanted to, you could give him different clothes. If you wanted him to wear like a jersey, you could, or just a t-shirt and pants, you could, because you know the shape of his body. So his head kind of has like this weird off-sided circle. Looks kind of like a cantaloupe maybe. And it's mostly round, but then right here on the right where his jaw is, it kind of has like a diagonal. So I'm just going to get it as close as I can. You know, it's not going to be perfect. I'm drawing lightly because I know I'm going to have to erase some of these lines. And then, as soon as I have his head shape down, which is kind of like this weird warped potato shape, I'm going to draw the little cross on his face, which is like a horizontal line going down and then a vertical line going down and a horizontal line going left and right. This allows me to put his eyes in the right place, and then you can kind of tell that the top line for his eyes is a little slanted. That's because his right eye is a little bit bigger than his left eye, and I can kind of see that the shapes on the top are not exactly right. It needs to be a little bit bigger to get those shapes to be the same, because when I do that little cross thing, it created 6 different shapes in his head, and so I want to make sure that those 6 shapes that you see, it's kind of like a six-pack sort of, a six-pack of rectangles. I want to make sure that's right. Now I'm going to start with his body, his torso. Now his torso is slanted a little bit, and it's also kind of potato shaped. It's kind of like a rectangle with curved edges. So it's going to go all the way down, and you can kind of see like the top of it kind of goes a little bit into his head right against that line that goes underneath his eye. And so now that I have his torso, I'm going to start drawing his arms. Now his arms come from his shoulders, so I draw little circles for their joints, and that's where your arms can bend and stuff. So if you wanted to, you could kind of move his arms around. Think of it kind of like his shoulder is a circle, it's a socket joint, and then it's like a really skinny rectangle that goes to his elbow, which is another circle where it's a joint where it can move, and then you've got another skinny rectangle that goes from his elbow to his wrist. And so you could kind of repose him if you wanted to. And so that's the nice thing about knowing how these characters are designed, how they're drawn. Instead of just trying to draw the shapes that you see, kind of learning how they work, what's going on underneath. And this will really help your drawing skills when you understand how these things are created and how they move. We're going to do the exact same thing down here at the bottom. Your legs are kind of like just longer versions of your arms. It starts with your hip joint right here. Your femur goes right into your hips, and a little ball and socket allows you to rotate your feet just like your arms in a 360. And then your knee is also a little hinge joint. It's a little ball, again, that allows you to move your knee, your leg, your backwards. And ankle, another little circle. And kind of notice this zombie because he's kind of all dragging his foot. He's got kind of like a dead leg right there. It kind of is slanted. It has like that diagonal line. And if you wanted to, you could straighten him out if you wanted to after you learn how his body works. And then for his feet right there, they're kind of like little mounds, little hills, or round rock shapes. And there's a little bit of overlapping. His right foot's in front of the left foot, but I still kind of draw it there because I know where it's at. It'll help me make sure that I draw the shoes in the right position. Since we have all of the body parts drawn out, I'm going to bring back my picture of the zombie, and I'm going to go up here to the face and start adding some details. Now, what I like to do is I try to work on the biggest shapes first, and then kind of move my way down to the smaller details. So for his face, I'm going to focus on his eyes, 2 circular shapes, and then you're going to kind of notice that his mouth is kind of like this weird, like it kind of goes in, and so there is some negative space right there where there's like that white part right by his mouth right there. So I'm going to kind of draw that the best I can. There's some really weird shapes on this zombie, and the only thing you can really do is kind of just draw it how you see it. And I'm using all these little lines that I've drawn to help kind of guide me. It's not going to be the exact same, but I think I can get it pretty close. All right, so I'm looking at that right there by his mouth where that kind of like that negative white shape is, in between, like inside the blue circle that I drew and where his mouth is on the left. Before I do any other details in his mouth, I'm going to probably just do his eyes because I think it's a little bit easier. He's got these really sunken eyes into his socket, and so they're kind of like this like really shallow like hole shapes. They're kind of like little circles that kind of go around each one of his eyes. Think like kind of like a skull, but the skull still has the eyeballs in there. So you're going to draw that. I'm going to draw a little bit of detail of his little cheek right there because his face is really skinny. You can see his skin starting to decay, and so he's starting to get really, really skinny. Okay, now that I got where his cheek is going to go into his jaw, I'm going to come down here and keep working on his mouth. Now notice he's got like 5 little teeth in his mouth, and then he's got some of his gums. His gums you can kind of see like kind of weird shaped, and so I'm going to kind of just go from each gum to each tooth, kind of just go down the row on the top and just do that, kind of lay his jaw in place. So I got this shape that his mouth has, and then I'm going to go in and add all those little bitty tiny shapes inside of his mouth the best that I can. His head is almost done. I just have to add a couple pupils and then define his jaw a little bit and then add his little nostrils because he doesn't have much of a nose left, just got 2 little holes to kind of smell with. And then I'm ready to start working on his suit jacket. I'm going to start with the sleeve that's the closest to me. That means it's his left arm, and I'm going to start right there at his wrist, kind of a slanted right rectangle shape right down there at the bottom right, covering up about half of his palm right there, kind of a rectangle shape. And then I'm going to go up from there, and you can kind of see that he's got like a hole in his elbow, and there's like this weird little shape. It looks kind of like maybe like an abstract, like a dinosaur track. It's kind of like 3 little claws. That's kind of what it reminds me of. And then his sleeve goes up and got a little wrinkle line, and then the other part of his sleeve on the other side, it kind of just goes up, and there's like a little Z shape, and then just kind of goes right up into his lapel. His lapel is that like lighter brown shape right in between his tie and his sleeve. His lapel is kind of this triangle shape, this really skinny triangle shape, and you kind of see that it kind of starts up here where his collar is, and then it actually goes through, and it goes all the way kind of below, after his arm. You can kind of see it kind of goes down, and that's like the start of the bottom of his jacket. And I'm going to work on that later. I'm not going to do the bottom of his jacket just yet. I'm going to still work on his collar and his tie now. His collar is just a little triangle kind of going straight down from his head, and then the knot of his tie is kind of just like a little hill shape, and then his tie itself that's coming out of that knot is kind of like a really long upside down kite shape. It kind of goes all the way down. Kind of notice that on the picture on the left, the tie kind of covers up where his right elbow is, and almost goes down to his wrist because it's kind of drooping forward. You know, I would love to know what these guys look like pre-zombie. I wonder if they've drawn like what this guy looked like before he was a zombie. I'd like to know that. Alright, now coming right off the side of his body behind his tie, you've got another piece of his other lapel. And that is like the part where people put like little buttons on it or something. You might see like the president might have like a little flag, or your governor. They always have little American flags on their lapels. Or sometimes like if you go to dance, like guys will have flowers. Boutonnieres, I think they're called boutonnieres, if I remember. It's been a while since I've been to a dance. But it's also very, very skinny triangle. Very skinny triangle going and kind of pointing right to his sleeve, and then it kind of just goes up right there above his tie. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw his other sleeve, and the other sleeve is very similar to the other one. You got kind of like this curved rectangle shape, and then you have you kind of see it kind of goes around. There's like a little triangle that goes around to make it look a little more 3D, because your sleeve is kind of like a round. It's kind of like an oval shape, really narrow oval shape. The fancy word for that is an ellipse. It's an ellipse shape. Now that his sleeves are done, I think I'm going to go ahead and finish this jacket. So I'm going to draw the edge of it. It's kind of tattered, and remember that you want to draw what you see. Don't just draw it like kind of just jaggedy randomly. It's best to really try to focus on trying to draw what you see, not to just draw generic tearing. Okay, that'll just improve your drawing skills to try to copy what you see, not just to make it up out of your head. And hopefully this will start training you to know what things look like. Always try to draw with references and stuff. It's the best way to improve your artwork is just to draw. Sometimes I gotta hide that blue drawing and kind of see some of the details because I'm covering it up a little bit. This right here is probably the trickiest part, his fingers. But I'm going to start with the finger that's the closest to me because then every other finger is kind of behind it, so a little overlapping. So I'm just going to start with his pinky, and I'm just going to kind of work my way down. So after the pinky is his ring finger, and it kind of a similar shape. It kind of just goes down and then over and then curves for the end of the finger. And then kind of notice that he's got 3 fingers kind of grouped together, all similar shape, but, you know, every single finger that goes along is a little bit bigger. And then he's got his pointer finger kind of sticking out, creates a little bit of a, look at that negative space. Look at the negative space in between his ring finger, or not his ring finger, his middle finger and his pointer finger. There's that little white gap. It's kind of like a weird looking, like upside down V shape. It's really important that you notice those little shapes and you can try to recreate it. With his right hand, I'm going to start with his thumb because his thumb is the closest to me. I always feel like it's easier to draw the things that are closer to me, and then I can fill in the things that are further away because there's a little bit of overlapping. So I'm going to draw his thumb kind of coming straight down here, and then from his thumb, there's like kind of like that little wrinkle in his hand that looks like an upside down mountain or a very wide V shape. And then the closest finger to me is his pointer finger, and I'm kind of going to just go down the row and kind of notice that each one of his fingers also very similar shape. It's kind of like a just goes down and then has like a bend and goes down. It's kind of like a rectangle that is making it like a V shape. So if you've ever drawn like a bubble V, and then the side of his palm is a little circle kind of coming down. But I'm kind of noticing that like in the picture on the left, his hands are actually almost touching, and mine's off by just a hair. I don't know, I might have to erase some of it and try it again. But that's okay. If your drawing's a little off, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, maybe this zombie, he's in a slightly different pose. It's a different part of his walking animation. I don't know. Maybe I could have drawn it a little bigger. Maybe it was a little bigger. It would have worked. I don't know. Who knows? So now onto his pants. Kind of notice that he's got one pant leg and then one like short because it's like been torn away. So I'm gonna draw the torn portion. I don't know what a portion is. The torn portion. And then he's got his little stubby leg. Not much meat on him. He probably needs to eat some more brains. I don't know. Can you have like zombies gain weight if they eat like too much brains? Or yeah, I've never really understood zombies because they eat brains, but I mean, do they have stomachs? Do they have digestive systems? I have no idea. I don't know how this works. Remember, I'm just using my little blue guides to kind of help me draw this. Now he's got kind of like a calf muscle right there. And he's got a very skinny, his leg is super, super tiny. Real quickly, I'm just going to kind of lay out where his other pant leg is going just to make sure that I'm getting the proportions right on his left leg. So I'm not going to do all the details for his other leg because his left leg is the one that's in front, but I just want to make sure that I know where this other leg is coming in at. Before I start drawing in the bottom of his pant leg, I'm going to kind of draw where the boot and his pants kind of rest right there, because then it'll kind of help me build it up. So I'm going to kind of work on that little light shoelace that he has right there. It's kind of like a little rectangle shape, and then at the bottom of his pant kind of just goes over, and I'm just drawing it the best that I can just by looking at it. These are some really weird shapes, but remember, if it's a zombie, remember it is a zombie, so if it looks a little weird or maybe he looks messed up, that's okay, because zombies are supposed to be messed up, right? I don't think anybody's going to notice that, his pants wrinkles aren't right or whatever. Okay, now to start drawing his shoe, notice there's kind of like a big bulge right there, and then he's got a really big sole on the front of his shoe. It's super thick, and it's kind of like a rectangle on its side that kind of goes around, and then you can see just a little tiny sliver of the bottom of his boot, and it's kind of like a really skinny triangle right on the bottom of that rectangle. Same thing for his right foot, but it's a little bit simpler. I think his pants is a little simpler because they're not all torn and stuff. It's kind of just like a straight line and just a kind of like an M shape for the wrinkles of the bottom of his shoe. And then same thing, I'm going to draw the bottom, the heel part of his shoe. I think it's easier to just kind of do the outline of the bottom of his shoe first and then go in and add where the shoe meets the sole and then where the sole meets the undersole, like that bottom, like that little lighter brown part. Once again, I'm just trying to draw it the best way I can see it. This definitely isn't the most easiest drawing, but as long as I'm drawing nice, simple shapes and I color them in, I think it'll look good almost no matter what. As long as you're drawing nice, clean shapes. And with that, my zombie is basically done. Now I'm going to go in here and start adding some of the little details now that I've gotten all the basic shapes out of the way, and I'm going to be pressing a little bit harder. And if you wanted to, you could come in here with a Sharpie, or you can start using colored pencils if you want. It's really up to you how you want to color this. If you're just doing a pencil drawing like I am, I'm just going to come in and darken all the lines that I want to keep. And I'm going to speed this up because this took me about like maybe 15 minutes to go over all the lines a little bit darker. So, and I think it's really fun to see the time lapse, because there's something about a time lapse that's just a little satisfying to see something get done, really fast, even though it took me like, a bunch of minutes to complete. You can kind of see that as I'm darkening the lines, I might be like even adjusting the drawing just a little bit, because I'm kind of noticing, oh, I could make this a little better right here. And so there's a lot of that artists do. They kind of just like make little fixes, because there's no reason to draw something 3 or 4 times with a pencil when you know you can fix it later on with a Sharpie when you're going through. Now the best part is to clean up my drawing. I'm going to take my eraser and get rid of all my unwanted lines, and now my drawing is really going to start to come to life, because I had to draw so many lines to kind of help get all the proportions right on this zombie. There's a lot of different shapes, a lot of different things going on, and so there are really light sketch lines everywhere, and so that's why it's always important to draw lightly, because you're probably going to have to erase a lot of stuff. And if you were going to paint this, then all this graphite would definitely make your paint really muddy. So it's always super important to erase all your pencils before you color it, because graphite can be super messy. This is also time-lapsed. I think it's super satisfying. So here's my zombie all finished, and I think he is hungry for some brains.
Well, kiddos, I hope you had a whole lot of fun drawing our zombie. I want you to make sure that you stay tuned to my channel, keep practicing with me, and I promise you're going to get better. And I will see you next time on Drawing with Trowbro.